Welcome to the Arizona Department of Education's video on integrating social studies and ELA. In 2018, the Arizona State Board of Education adopted new social studies standards and gave time recommendations for elementary classrooms. With the push for extended ELA and math time, this leaves little extra time for social studies. This video will show you ways in which you can integrate social studies with ELA to maximize student learning and meet the time recommendations. Where are we now? According to the National Assessment for Educational Progress, studies show that only 23% of American 8th graders are proficient in civics. Since No Child Left Behind, 44% of school districts have reduced time for social studies. And on average, 78.8% of time allotted in an elementary classroom is devoted to ELA and math, whereas social studies and science receive only 21.2% of time allotted. So why integrate social studies and ELA? Studies conducted by Daniel Willingham on increasing content knowledge of students and by Lauren Leslie and Joanne Caldwell on content area reading assessments prove that barring any issues with decoding, better comprehension is driven by increasing background knowledge. By integrating social studies and ELA, you will build that background knowledge your students need to be more successful readers and writers. Also, by combining the two content areas, you will have increased efficiency within your classroom, allowing for a greater depth into both topics and skills. No longer will you need to put away your reading and take out your social studies. Your students' writing will improve with quality responses as their background knowledge expands. And last, excite students with social studies content that engages them to question and think critically. So, where to start? One suggestion to integrate social studies and ELA is to build an awesome and varied library. Use social studies texts to teach nonfiction reading and writing skills. Gather primary and secondary sources to include in your library. Great examples would be newspapers, magazines, biographies, and online resources such as Newsela, Docs Teach, resources from the Arizona Geographic Alliance, and the C3 Inquiries website. As you build your library, look for both primary and secondary sources. Now, unless you were a history major, these terms may be unfamiliar to you. So let's go over them. A primary source provides direct or first-hand evidence about an event, an object, a person, or a work of art. Characteristically, primary sources are contemporary to the events and people described and show minimal or no mediation between the document and artifact and its creator, meaning they were there or created at the time of the event. As to the format, primary source materials can be both written and non-written. The latter may include sounds, pictures, artifacts. Some examples of primary sources include personal correspondence and diaries, works of art and literature, speeches and oral histories, audio and video recordings like Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech or sounds of the Apollo 11 rocket taking off. Photographs, posters, and architecture are also primary sources, as are newspaper ads and stories, laws and legislative hearings of the era. Census or demographic records and historical maps also are primary sources, as are plant and animal specimens, coins, tools, and other artifacts. A secondary source, in contrast, lacks the immediacy of a primary record. As materials produced sometime after an event happened, they contain information that has been interpreted, commented, analyzed, or processed in such a way that it no longer conveys the original freshness of the event. History textbooks, dictionaries, encyclopedias, interpretive journal articles, and book reviews are all examples of secondary sources. Secondary sources can be and are often based on primary sources. Another suggestion for integrating social studies and ELA is to create a classroom newsroom. With this idea, you could have news anchors that report classroom, school, or historical news. They could also report current events, both local and national. The anchors, along with the class, can then discuss and write about the news that they have heard. Another piece of the classroom newsroom are interviews. Have students conduct interviews of family, friends, and staff. If you are studying a specific content area of social studies that is more recent, have them ask questions of people who lived through it. Your students will be recording and writing about primary sources from the lives of people they know. You can also have older students conduct interviews of historical people, where both the reporter and the interviewee are learning about the person for the interview. Conducting interviews, both historical and by people experiencing recent events, gives students an understanding of the perspectives, which is part of the new social studies standards. Lastly, for older students, use online resources to find those different perspectives and points of view of a historical event or movement. Another way to integrate social studies and ELA is through unique writing prompts. Think outside of the box. Give students a political cartoon or a picture and have them write responses of the people in the picture. After learning about an event, have students write an editorial critiquing that topic using evidence. A web quest can also serve as an interesting and different mode of research and analysis for your students. As the content knowledge of your students builds over the school year, create a word wall for them to reference. This additional content will be useful as a reference and reminder of the content that they have learned. And while you can create a beautiful and colorful bulletin board, a social studies word wall can be made of simple large index cards. Get students involved. Have them draw images to go with the vocabulary that they have learned. More integration can occur as students gain that valuable background knowledge and use that knowledge to interact in historical role plays. These don't have to be elaborate or with costumes. A simple name tag pinned to a student to identify who they are, or hand puppets, work well. Students can write scripts, dialogues, interviews, or whatever you choose. Students then take on the role of the different perspectives of the people involved in an event. With role play, it is important to be mindful of cultural issues and not reinforce stereotypes of marginalized peoples. Role plays can also be scaffolded for students to just fill in information to make it easier for lower level students, or let students write their own material with teacher approval using the content that they have learned. It's up to you. Have fun with it. Another way to integrate social studies and ELA is by using timelines. These can be displayed around the classroom, and as you cover content, you can add information to the timeline. Or in early elementary grades, where new social studies curriculum is about students as citizens and being part of a community, have students complete personal timelines to make it relevant, and you get your social studies content covered. Students can write as much or as little as you want for the individual events of a timeline. Last, develop better readers and writers by using inquiry. Disciplinary skills and processes are a big part of the new social studies standards, and many of these standards are covered by using inquiry methods. Inquiry, when used in social studies, builds context and perspective. Inquiry focuses on historical thinking skills like cause and effect, comparison, chronology, and argumentation rather than facts. For students, it becomes less of when did Columbus come to the Americas, but why? Who did it impact? What are the results? Inquiry places the focus on the why as it emphasizes a compelling question. Even young students benefit from inquiry. For example, a good question might be, why does pizza have tomato sauce? This would lead to an investigation of the exchange of ideas, diseases, food and animals that occurred when Spaniards reached the Americas, and that historians now call the Columbian Exchange. Inquiry lessons can be complete, fully developed lessons, or they can be a quick little starter piece at the beginning of a lesson or as an exit ticket. The key is to get students thinking by answering questions. If you are interested in further professional development on using inquiry in your classroom, go to the Arizona State K-12 Standards website and look for trainings, webinars, and other videos on using inquiry in the classroom. Thank you for watching our video on integrating social studies with ELA. For questions or concerns, please contact either Tammy Waller at tammy.waller@azed.gov or Linda Burrows at linda.burrows@azed.gov, or visit the Arizona Department of Education Social Studies Standards website. Thank you.